You're listening to the Yeshiva of Newark at IDT podcast. I'm your host and curator, Rabbi Kivelevitz, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Clear the aisles, the Projectionist, that's Semicha. Hi, I'm here with Rabbi Kolakowski, and we concocted an interesting program, I think, today. We're talking about the Siodmak brothers. And you say, who? What? You know, for most people, well, they know the Cohen brothers. They know the Mankowitzes. Siodmaks? Like, what? Now, they are refugees, both of them refugees from Germany, Jewish, very much so, from father and mother both. Both were active in German cinema, expressionist type of cinema that was developed in the 20s and the 30s, the cinema that really came to the U.S. as well. We talked about Fritz Lang the other day, and Siodmaks were part of that same group. And of course, they realized as Jews, they would be persecuted, and they were able to escape. They came to Hollywood. And I would say, Robert and his younger brother, Curt, they had prolific careers here in the United States. And although people know about Michael Curtiz, they know about William Wellman, they know about a number of Billy Wilder, a number of Jewish directors, many of them refugees who came here. There are the Siodmaks, there are corners in the Hollywood geek world that know them very well, but I think it's worth for us to at least uncover this iceberg a little bit about who they were, and at least some of the films they made. Some people, now Yitzchak is obviously much more into Curt than Robert, right? Yitzchak, I mean, Curt is is someone who's special for you, right?
Yeah, I guess for all monster kids. Yeah.
He really was not. First of all, Curt, although he did his share of directing, really was an incredible screenwriter. He really, in a way, was prolific. And you were just telling me off pod that he was the inventor in some ways of the whole Wolfman franchise.
Yeah, he not only of the Wolfman franchise, but of a lot of the mythology that we think of when we think of werewolves. He really invented.
Clearly, there was a lot to mine out of that black forest that Siodmak came from, and he was able to give it to put a lot of skin and bones on that skeletal structure of those legends, and to turn out screenplays for a number of films that where the werewolf was featured.
The idea of a werewolf only being able killed by a silver bullet or a silver. He invented the idea of associating a pentagram as the sign of a wolf, the sign of a beast. Obviously, a reference to Christian scripture, but taking it not what's written in there. It's taking it further, and the poetry that he invented. Even a man who's pure in heart and says his prayers by night may become a wolf when the wolfsbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright, and they changed it to the moon is full and bright. I didn't even have to look at that.
Yes, you're able to pull that out of your hat, out of your shtreimel. Look, Siodmak was extremely prolific. He was a writer on 82 different films, according to the websites. And again, I know that not all of them were classics. It seems like he was doing it for the money, essentially. He wasn't. I don't know if he was a great auteur or not. I don't know.
Some of the ones that he made in the 50s, I was kind of disappointed with. The Creature with the Atom Brain. I had never seen. It was for Columbia, and it was played on Spenguli a few weeks ago, and I was not that impressed. It was not. It wasn't as great as the Wolfman. The Wolfman really, it was really a great movie, and it was a great franchise also. And Siodmak wrote the screenplays for the first three movies that really were, the main character was this Larry Talbot, always played by Lon Chaney Jr.
And when Frankenstein met the Wolfman, right? And
there were 5 movies in the series, and the first 3 were written, screenplays written by Curt Siodmak. That was The Wolfman, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, and The House of Frankenstein. And
unfortunately, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, they couldn't get Karloff to play it, right? Karloff did not.
They got Lugosi. Well, but
yeah, that's right. They got Lugosi to play Frankenstein.
Well, it made a certain amount of sense because the previous Frankenstein movie was Ghost of Frankenstein, and in Ghost of Frankenstein they had Lon Chaney Jr. actually playing the Frankenstein monster.
Yeah, so here they switched here.
Lon Chaney Jr. played all 3 and the one movie that the 2 brothers made together was The Son of Dracula, where Lon Chaney Jr. was the son of Dracula, Count Alucard, down in the bayou. He played the mummy 3 times. So Lon Chaney Jr. did them all.
Yes.
But as far as the Lugosi playing the Frankenstein monster in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, part of the idea was that in the previous 2 Frankenstein movies, The Son of Frankenstein, The Ghost of Frankenstein, Lugosi played probably his greatest role was Igor the Hunchback, where he really showed off his acting chops, I think, more than he did in Dracula, and in both of those films. And in the end of Ghost of Frankenstein, Igor's brain was put into the Frankenstein monster. And so the original plan was that in that movie, the monster would be talking, and you would have Lugosi's voice, obviously, because it was Igor's brain in this monster. But they did, I think they filmed some scenes where Lugosi spoke, and Siodmak wrote lines for him, but in the end, they cut those from the movie, so you don't actually have them in the movie. And then the next one in the series was House of Frankenstein, and there you had really kind of 2 short vignettes where Karloff played a mad scientist, and he encountered Dracula, who was played by John Carradine, and then the Wolfman, again, Lon Chaney was the Wolfman, and Glenn Strange played the Frankenstein monster as more of a smaller character in this movie called House of Frankenstein. And the next 2 they continued the Wolfman quintology, I guess, would be the House of Dracula, again mashing up Dracula played by John Carradine, again Frankenstein monster very briefly as Glenn Strange, and the main character really once again would be the Wolfman, but played
by Lon Chaney.
Lon Chaney, and then
I have to say, just to interrupt here, and I hope Chava's listening, that I think the great homage that was done for Lon Chaney Jr. Gene Levy played a character on SCTV called Woody Tobias Jr. And along with John Candy's Dr. Tongue, they were these 2. They had been in horror movies together, and they were trying to somehow make a living, opening up restaurants and trying to make still something out of their career. And it's a great send up of Woody, because again, Lon Chaney Jr., he did as Eugene Levy shows in this parody, is just always trying to live up and bank on who his dad was. Obviously, the Man of a Thousand Faces, Lon Chaney himself, sort of invented in many ways the whole monster genre in the silent films that he played in. Do you think Lon Chaney Jr., who's Siodmak and Lon Chaney Jr. were sort of like, I guess attached at the hip? Do you think Lon Chaney Jr., you consider him a significant presence? Do you think he's one of the great horror actors?
He was brilliant as Lenny and of Mice of Men.
Yes, right. That's true. That's true.
And then, but this character of the Wolfman is really a brilliant character. He really, even though he made a lot of schlocky movies later, but play, and even his other roles that he did just under a lot of makeup as the Mummy and Frankenstein monster and things like that. He it wasn't much to talk about, although it was interesting. But the Wolfman character and the continuity that there was throughout those 5 films, even though it wasn't the best continuity, but he really brought a lot of, because he was a tragic figure. He didn't want this. He really just wanted to die, and he was really over in Frankenstein meets the Wolfman. They have the musical number where it's the feast of the new wine, and just they break out in song in the middle of this monster movie, and in the end the guy singing wishes this Lawrence Talbot and Frankenstein's granddaughter that they should live eternally, and he was just screaming, "No, I don't want to live eternity. I want to die. I want to die." And it was
yes, being cursed by having to be this monstrous beast.
And the Son of Dracula, which again, that's the one where the 2 brothers work together. Chaney was much more subdued. He was much quieter. He wasn't really. It was a different type of characterization. A lot of that, they say, it's part of the brilliance of Robert Siodmak's direction in that movie, of how he was able to direct Chaney. I'm not that impressed by that movie, even though it's not bad, but it's not. It's I love all of the Universal monster movies, but it's not really one of my top ones. I think the Wolfman, all of them is much better.
Yeah. Look, before we move, let's do a little speculation here. As you say, the Wolfman is such a tragic figure. He's unlike the vampires like Dracula and his ilk, that they are the undead. They live forever through the blood of sucking of others. The Wolfman tries to be a normal person, but is transformed into a monster every month, and a monster that can't control his himself, a monster that is basically ready to kill, and even those that are close to him. So in a way, yes, the Wolfman doesn't have eternal life, though, does he?
He does in these movies, that he winds up, if they take the silver out or whatever, he's resurrected, and he's trying to figure out either a way to die or to
stop himself from transforming.
Yeah, so meaning in the that's the reason why he goes to the house of to Frankenstein's granddaughter, is to try to find the secret of death and to be cured of this just by being able to die, because in the Frankenstein meets the Wolfman, that was the whole point, was that he could not die.
It definitely taps into a primal fear that I guess humans have, their anger, what they can be, the beast aspect of man. So yes, the Wolfman isn't just a weird transformation. In a way, it really scrapes the psyche of people's fears. None of us like to see ourselves in our worst moments, and the idea that you have a person who becomes the beast, I mean, this is really something that has to do with our own bestial nature. It really taps into the aggression and other things which are part and parcel of life. I think that's part of the reason why it holds such power.
I mean, that's even the joke. Again, this is not Siodmak already then, but in Frankenstein and Abbott and Costello meet the Wolfman, Lon Chaney tells Lou Costello, "I turn into a wolf," and he's like, "You and the thousands of other men. What's the big deal?"
No, you're correct. The idea, which is a good point, of course, Tex Avery and all his cartoons have the wolves being actual, sex fiends, and preying on all these women. So I think you're right. Part of it is, it's not just the aggression of murder; It's the aggression of overpowering women and having them. That's all part of, I think, this this curse of the wolfman. I think that's what it taps into. Man knowing himself as in the throes of lust, rapists, people that attack out of anger, people who kill in such frustration. And I guess that's part of the reason why the story of the Wolfman could be recycled, and it's still this Wolfman, and they're both vying for the love of whatever the heroine of the girl. So I think it's still very much part of popular culture, and still, extremely rings a lot of bells with people.
Another movie, which I don't know if you heard what Chava said, that I think we might have brought up in the past, that Cheney did, mentioning that idea that you just mentioned about, the rapist, and that he plays this fellow who's in the movie called The Alligator People. He has a moment where he's about to rape this woman, and the alligator man saves her, which is actually her husband, is the alligator man, and it's frightening. It really is chilling how he captures that. And so he certainly had better acting chops than he's often given credit for. You see some of the other movies that he did, like The Indestructible Man or whatever, the more schlocky type movies, when he was just, that whole movie, even though he originally had lines, but he had a sore throat, so they had him only have a few lines in the beginning of the movie, and then he was mute the rest of the movie. But
Cagney, of course, made a film called Man of a Thousand Faces, which was a biopic about Lon Chaney Sr. And I saw that film many, many years ago. It wasn't again, it's a Hollywood treatment of the Lon Chaney story. And it's interesting. I think Lon Chaney Jr. was upset that he was not asked to play that part. I'm pretty sure.
His name wasn't Lon. His name was Creighton. He changed it. The filmmakers wanted to cash in on the father, so that's why they started calling him Lon Chaney or Lon Chaney Jr.
Was unaware totally about Curt's contributions, but I'd heard about Robert. I'd heard about Robert Siodmak. Many people have pointed to him as one of the core creators of what later became known as film noir. And as we talk about black film, part of what Robert did was really bring, as I said, that dark expressionist images into film, the type of things that silent films really perfected. But he was able, with the advancement of film techniques and sound, to really do incredibly beautifully graphic stuff. Many people consider Robert sort of like a bargain basement Hitchcock because of some of his attempts at brilliance at camera work. But I actually believe that he is sold short as well. It's true, not everything that he made is a classic, but there are two films in particular that I happened to catch this past week, once again on Criterion Channel. One of them is called Phantom Lady, and Phantom Lady was discovered. It was written by William Irish, which is really the pen name of Cornell Woolrich, who had written he was one of the most prolific, brilliant mystery writers of the 30s and 40s. And so many of his properties were turned into films of one type or another, or television programs. And this story is really has such power to it. You have a person who has gone out on the town with a woman, and he's upset and she's upset, and they don't even exchange names with each other. But they've gone out and they've gone to a bar, they've been in a cab, they've gone to a Broadway show, but he doesn't get her name. She doesn't want to sell her name. She's been through too much. Let's just enjoy each other's company. When he comes home, he discovers that his wife has been strangled and the police are in his apartment. Of course, he has the perfect alibi. But when he goes to confirm his alibi with the police inspector in tow. Every single person who he remembers being with, who was part of that night, remembers him, but doesn't remember the woman. And there you get the Phantom Lady. And here he is, an innocent man being set up, but by who? And where is this woman? Why she disappeared? Why is everybody lying? That's the setup for the film. What's interesting about it is that the protagonist of the novel and the film is a woman, not the Phantom Lady herself, but in a way the other Phantom Lady, the working girl who during the 40s, especially when this film was made, had come into great prominence as so many of the young men had been out at war. Turns out that there is a secretary of this fellow who has his own engineering firm. And she, of course, has been secretly pining in love over her married boss, but I guess she's never really been able to tell him. But now it turns out not only is his wife dead, but the boss is being sent up the river. He's being tried as a murderer. And she knows that her boss is a good human being, and she's going to try to solve this herself. And the film is really follows the book in this way, that it's the odyssey of this woman trying to discover what's really going on. And Siodmak films the scenes of her detective work, the way she stalks the bartender who lied, with such drama, with such tension. It's really as good as anything Hitch has ever done in terms of what's going to happen, the steps, the looks that you get from the principals involved. The star of the film is an actress who was really just at the cusp of what could have been a really great career at that time, Ella Raines. She had done a couple of small things beforehand, but this was really 1944 was really her breakout year. She made this film, and she holds this film completely. There is a scene that Siodmak films as she's continuing her investigations. And of course, one of film noir's greatest character actors, Elisha Cook Jr., who not only in The Maltese Falcon, but in so many films, in Kubrick's The Killing, plays a crucial role. I think Elisha Cook Jr. never mailed in a bad performance. He is such a dramatis personae. And in this film, Elisha Cook was given some drumming lessons because he's the drummer at the Broadway show that this Carmen Miranda type character was actually Carmen Miranda's younger sister, Aurora Miranda, who actually played this role. And part of the key aspect that's going to solve the mystery is that the Phantom Lady was wearing a ostentatious hat that Aurora Miranda was wearing during one of the dance sequences. And you could see that she was getting upset that there's someone in the audience wearing the same hat she is. How could that be? Especially the woman sitting in such a prominent place. The drummer, who's the drummer of the band, is played by Elisha Cook Jr. Ella Raines, playing the long-suffering and love secretary, decides that the way she's going to find out information about who is paying them to keep quiet is to dress herself up in fishnet stockings and chewing gum and getting her head up in a bun and coming to the show and giving him the eye. Of course, the film points out that she's really this wonderful girl from Wichita, Kansas, but she'd be willing to do anything to save her boss, including dressing up as this cheap hussy and then allowing herself to be picked up by Elisha Cook. There is a scene which has been pointed at by many, many film critics as one of the most erotic and shocking things ever to be put on film in the 40s, which was when he takes her to a jive club. Fortunately, there was very few blacks in this film and not playing the music that, of course, they helped develop. But there's this jive little club, like a little back alley. And in that, with shot in all these weird angles that Siodmak shoots it in, you have a scene where Alicia Cook gets onto the drums and staring with no audible dialogue into the face and form of Ella Raines dressed as this hussy. And she is trying to urge him on because she's hoping later to get the information from him. She feigns, just like in the film When Harry Met Sally, she feigns the type of erotic pleasure of what's turning her on during this drum solo. And the wildness in Alicia Cook's eyes and the ecstatic aspect that Ella Raines has during this performance is really, in a way, the closest Hollywood has ever come to, in the 40s, to showing a sex scene, because that's basically what it is. It's incredible that Siodmak was able, and his crew were able to get that through the censors. It turns out that when she drops a piece of paper, that Alicia Cook Jr. realizes that she's not who she says she is, and she gets attacked by him, and she has to run out of his apartment. And of course, she finds refuge with a kind German Jewish couple who live in a delicatessen across the street. Suffice to say that Siodmak reveals the murderer about a little bit more than halfway into the film, and just like, I guess Hitchcock in Psycho, that really isn't the point. As much as, when Cornel Woolrich wrote the story, there was a sense of mystery. Siodmak actually is much more concerned about turning everything on its head. There's a number of haunting scenes in the jail when she comes to visit her boss. And there's another little piece of work here that I marveled at, and I don't know who came up with the idea. We know that Yitzchak, there's probably been, thousands of films that have had trials and evidence being put into towards the judge. And what is the way that a film viewer can absorb that without it being just a bunch of exposition that doesn't really have energy? So what Siodmak does is basically use the technique of shorthand. You see the pieces of paper emblazoned on top with the date in New York City and the actual date of 1943, and you can see the stenographer's hand writing in shorthand as the words are being said by the various witnesses and judges and lawyers, by the judge and lawyers. I thought that was a very unusual and interesting technique to keep the trial going without having to resort to histrionics. Just seeing the hand of the stenographer. Choton gets top billing in this film, and he's the best friend who was in South America, who becomes an ally to the secretary to try to maybe save her boss. But it's really Ella Raines' performance and the way Siodmak actually turns it into a great performance. It's really had it not been for the type of expressionist shtick that he does, this film would be cute, interesting. This is really an example of how you can take B material and elevate it And, it's sort of like, he could have really, just made it done it as cheaply and as efficiently as possible. He really wanted this to be a work of art. And I think it does stand that way. The other film that was made in the same year that Siodmak made in 1944, also with Ella Raines, is called The Suspect. And it stars Charles Laughton and Ella Raines. And it's interesting, Yitzchak, if you take a look at the movie poster for this film, and of course the movie poster has to have a woman, it has to have a woman in some sort of pose that'll bring all the wolves into the theater. And in this film, it said, "The strange love that she had." Well, the reason is because Ella Raines is in love with Charles Laughton, who not only is probably 30 years or 35 years her senior, is probably also weighs probably about 4 times as much as she does. And he eats quite a bit in this film as well, as we know. This film is it's I guess that's because Hollywood didn't know how to sell this film. And I think it was somewhat of a box office bomb. But the film is really, again, Siodmak flipping things on its head. Basically, Charles Laughton is a murderer, but he's the nicest murderer you've ever met. He is a wonder. Margaret Hamilton could not have played this role any greater. I mean, played by Rosalind Ivan, and she is the most shrewish, shrill, disgusting wife you could have. She is not only does she nag, she insults, she complains. In the beginning of the film, their son can't stand living with his mother, and tries to tell the father how he's fighting the good fight, and the father Laughton tries to be as Mr. Marshall. He tries his best to be civil with her, but she, if anyone is deserving of being not hit by a cane and bludgeoned to death, it would be her. And everyone in the audience hates her, because you realize that she is so cruel, she is so evil, and so petty. And even as he tries to be realistic and talk about a divorce and how she won't hear any of it. Now, of course, he has started up this affair with this young woman who's looking for a job that he discovers crying, and she incredibly falls for this nice gentleman who takes her out to various parties and plays and things that she has never been exposed to before. The movie mentions how her father has just died recently. So I guess if you want to play psychologist here, you could say that she saw this older man as a father replacement. But there's a scene where she is working in a dressmaking shop, and there's a bunch of models in various stages of undress, and she's talking about her boyfriend, and she's talking about how he weighs 18 stone or something like that, and how she really loves him. The second murder that occurs is when a blackmailer steps in, who is a wife beater who lives next door, a wife beater and a drunkard. And what's incredible about this film is that you don't see any of the murders, you don't see any of the violence itself. The murderer is the hero. He's genteel. He has the best lines. Many people have said that Siodmak's direction of Laughton was magnificent, because Laughton was known for his excesses, if you remember, in The Hunchback of Notre Dame and many other films, Advise and Consent. Later in his career, the man was a intractable ham. But in this film, he plays it very low-key and yet extremely effective. There's not a bit of chicanery or false moves, and I would assume Siodmak was able to get it from him. Now, there is suspense.
They were good friends, Siodmak and
Laughton. Right. Lawton learned from Siodmak a lot of the techniques that he employed in one of our picks over last year, which of course Night of the Hunter. Night of the Hunter has quite a bit of similarity to actually Phantom Lady. I don't want to give Phantom Lady away, but the murderer in Phantom Lady also has issues with his hands, similar to Robert Mitchum's character as the preacher in Night of the Hunter. So Siodmak did a great job with Lawton, and you actually, unlike most films where you're caught at the end, is this the end of Rico? Siodmak does not do that. There is a sort of John Williams type of inspector who's after him, Inspector Huxley from Scotland Yard, who knows what occurred but just doesn't have the evidence and is trying to trip him up. And I think it's a pretty decent performance, but I think both of these films are examples of how a director, of course, based on the writer. But being able to put something forth that rises above the tropes of the genre, and again, you don't always have a choice to do the great epic like auteurs like Kubrick and even Hitchcock in his later years had. But I think I think Robert Siodmak and Curt, let's put it this way. I think they have to be extolled as probably some of the greatest brother team in Hollywood history. The Coen brothers, they might have to move over, because I think if you take the totality of what both of them did, I'm not even counting Criss Cross and The Killers and the other films that Siodmak made. Just what he did in 1944 and just what he did for Ella Raines in both of these films is quite, it's wonderful. It's like when you root for the murderer and you're very happy about all the people he kills. Today, I'm not that familiar with the program, but of course, one of the most popular programs today is Dexter, who's a serial killer who kills all the bad guys. And I think, of course, in Hollywood, you had to, you couldn't have a person in the 40s escape from a crime, but we all know that these type of this ending doesn't seem to be tacked on, and without giving much away, the only reason why Charles Lawton's character does not escape conviction for the two murders he's committed is because of his great nobility for the sake of another person. So you really end up, instead of getting the story of like a Blue Angel type of story, where you have an old man who's fallen helplessly in love with a femme fatale, which you had so often in the Blue Angel and Edward G. Robinson's The Woman in the Window and Scarlet Street. Here you have a film that the actual, as weird as it is, you have this old fat guy and this young English girl. Why not? They seem to get along famously, and really not much is made of it, despite what the poster tries to trumpet. So that's a bit of it, my friends. I think the Siodmak's in there, Gan Eden. Let's hope they appreciate how we have tried to highlight them, and they're worthy of exploring, because there's a lot more gold in them there hills than we've brought to the table today. So watch your step on the way, and everybody, take care, everybody. Thanks for joining us for another episode from the Yeshiva of Newark at IDT Podcast. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast app so you don't miss a single episode.